I think we can all pretty much agree at this point that the middle class is effectively dead. It doesn't really exist anymore. And so this raises an obvious question. If there's not a middle class, if there's not a way to distinguish the poor from the ultra wealthy, like what kind of organization is society going to take moving forward? I think some people have posited this, that it's just going to be a binary between the poor and the wealthy. But I don't fully agree that that's the case, because obviously, as you see in the world around you, there's varying levels of wealth. Even within the middle class, there's a distinction between the lower middle class slash the working class, the middle class, the upper middle class. There's a lot of distinction, and so something is going to replace the middle class as we knew it. The question is what. And I think it could possibly be a tiered system of different price levels, different experiences, different features, different things that convey different status in society. And I saw this article in Inc. It popped up on X. It's from back in September, but I think it's a really relevant piece, because this actually happened to me recently when I went to Costco. So this piece talks about Costco's new policy. If you are not a Costco shopper, let me clue you in. So basically, they've increased their monthly or their annual memberships you have to pay to go to Costco. And so the gold, like peasant level membership, if you will, is $65. And the executive tier is $130. And so for the longest time, the value of getting the executive tier is that you get like a percentage cash back of your purchases. So if you spend a lot of money at Costco, eventually the cash back will pay for itself. So there's value in that. But what they've done in addition to that is they've started adding premium features. So the author writes here, those who pay extra, so those who get in on the executive membership, now get an extra hour to shop in relative peace in the morning, except for Saturdays when they only get an extra half hour, separate from the hoi polloi at the chain's often crowded stores. So not this past trip, I went over the weekend, but when I went, I go about once a month. So in November, I got flagged. I guess they do this based on your spending. But I got flagged. So like some person came over and talked to me and told me like at the rate I was spending, if I upgraded to the executive card, that I would like earn enough cash back to cover. And they're like, oh, by the way, like you can come in an extra hour and shop. And that really actually did pique my interest, because for those of you who shop at Costco, you know, depending on when you go, it can be absolutely insane. Even this weekend, I went on Saturday. Usually I go during the week, but I went on Saturday. And I told my husband, I was like, I want to go early, you know, pretty close to when they open, because I knew it was going to be crazy. Shockingly, it wasn't. But, you know, those of you, you know, it could just be crazy, people everywhere. It's hard to navigate. And I have a pretty like set routine of what I get at Costco. I'm not there to peruse. Like, yeah, I'd like some samples now and then, but you can't always get those. But I usually get the same things. I want to be in and out of there as quickly as possible. So the extra hour appealed to me, and it like I remembered it. So when I saw this article, it was like, wow, okay, so this is actually part of a bigger effort. And so this is based on how like these businesses are starting to see consumers, and these businesses no longer see us really as people to serve, right? They're no longer in service of the customer. Here, there's a quote from the CEO, James Senegal, and it says, people are our most important product. So what's basically happening right now is companies are productizing their consumer, and they're doing that with data in order to sort us and segment us into different classes of people based on how much purchasing power and spending power we have. So the more you're able to spend, the more money you're able to fork over, the better experience, the more perks, the more benefits you're going to get. And so, of course, there's a lot of people that aren't happy with this policy for a number of different reasons. And I mean, I can get it, because I don't know that it was explicitly communicated. I remember like hearing about the price increase last year. I don't remember about the like premium shopping time. So that's new. But it, you know, this article gets at, I think, the heart of this, and it's the fact that the middle class is effectively dead. And everyone knows like Costco is your quintessential middle class store. And then it says here, like business leaders are offering premium services that make the experience of their product relatively worse for other customers, and better for others, and especially those who are willing to pay more. So it references an essay in the New York Times, which I'm going to dive into in a moment, about how companies are targeting their clients and customers that have greater purchasing power in order to extract more revenue from them. And basically the gist of this and the argument that the author makes in that essay is that data and AI makes it possible for companies to target and segment different elements of the population. So kind of think of it like the sorting hat from Harry Potter. Like, we now have a technology that can effectively sort all of us in such a way that companies know how to push and incentivize and structure offerings to get the most bang for their buck. And so this is the addition of premium pricing and like just premium features and experiences is creating a shift in the economy. So it says here, the middle class has so eroded in the size of purchasing power that the wealth of our top earners has exploded. America's most important market today is its affluent. And in case you don't believe that to be true, this is a piece that was published in the Wall Street Journal. It's paywall, but you'll get the gist from the headline back in February. But America's richest 10% now account for nearly half of all consumer spending. So basically, households that make about $250,000 a year or more are the ones who are spending the most in the economy. So when you're hearing numbers coming out in the mainstream media or government figures, and everyone's talking about, oh, how resilient the economy is and people are spending money, the people who are spending money are in this $250,000 plus cohort. It's not the rest of us. The rest of us are not spending money. If we are, we're spending it on essentials, or it's all being spent on credit. And you can see this through the proliferation of new credit tools. For one, like credit card debt's through the roof, delinquencies are through the roof, but you're also seeing a rapid proliferation of people using buy now, pay later services for things like getting groceries, right? So it's very clear we have run out of purchasing power. We're primarily, like, the middle class is spending on credit at this point. So whatever growth you're seeing in the economy, it's happening within this rich segment. And this is happening in real estate too, by the way, not just consumer spending. If you look at mortgage applications and mortgage data over the past couple of months, because the Fed did drop interest rates, you'll see that the vast majority of those mortgages, a lot of them are going towards luxury homes, $1 million plus homes, homes that cater to this class. It's not going to the average middle class person making, the $86,000 a year median. So keep that in mind, that these are the people driving the economy right now. Okay, so I want to just briefly go over this essay because I think this is really insightful. And reading through this kind of opened my eyes. I was completely unaware that Disney had changed this much. I've only been to Disney World once. I went in 2008 with high school, so I would have been like 15, 16, 17 at the time. But our marching band did a trip there. Like, they have marching bands that come, so we did like a parade there. But I don't remember the cost per person. It couldn't have been more than a couple $100s. I'll say that much. But I remember we got a 4-day park hopper pass. We got to stay at one of the hotels on the resort, or like one of the hotels on the Disney resort. So you just had to take a bus to get around. And I don't know if we chartered a private jet because that sounds really fancy and expensive, but the town I grew up in, there's enough snowbirds that fly from up north down south that there's like direct flights to Orlando. So I don't know if we chartered a private jet or if like we were able to secure a deal because there were so many people going with like one of the carriers that does the direct routes that we were able to. Either way, we were able to fly down directly to Orlando. And ironically, we went, I think it was May. I think it was like April or May. All I remember is the day we got back, there was this massive snowstorm and we had a snow day. So it's like you just spent, a week at Disney World in Florida and then you get back and there's a snow day. So that was fun. I remember though, like I wasn't really impressed. Again, like I was a teenager going, so the aura of Disney had kind of faded at this point. Maybe I would have had a different experience if I was like a 4, 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old. But I wasn't impressed. Like I spent most of my time fast passing, right? Like you could fast pass. Apparently that's gone now. But you could do the single rider line and then get a fast pass. And so I would I remember at like, what was it, MGM, I would go between Rock and Roller Coaster and Tower of Terror, and that's all I wanted to do all day. I just want to go, like I love roller coasters, so I just want to ride those rides. So I did that. I think like I went through Epcot once, and it was whatever, and Animal Kingdom and obviously Magic Kingdom. Star Wars wasn't open yet, so that wasn't there. But like it was pretty uneventful. I remember going backstage and everything smelled of alcohol. So I don't know what the Disney crew people are doing backstage, but it smelled like y'all have problems. So I just, yeah. And then I just remember like they had like the random meet and greets, and you would just like, you would see all these parents and these kids, and they were all decked out in their Disney regalia, and like you had 4-year-olds throwing temper tantrums trying to meet Cinderella, and it just seemed miserable. Like I will never take my kids to Disney, I'll tell you that right now. It just seems like a money sink. And based on this essay, like it clearly is. So this follows the experience of a woman named Scarlett Kressel, who this essay describes as middle class. I would argue she's not middle class like we think of middle class. When I think of, I guess in the current context, to think of middle class, probably like a family making over $100,000. I think it's pretty clear at this point. If you're making below the median household income, so that's $86,000 a year, I think. If you're making below that, like you're not middle class. And so this woman and I think her daughter combined, like pulled together their resources, but combined they make 80K. So this woman is only making $40,000 a year as a school bus driver. So I would not consider her middle class. I'd consider her working poor. But these are all the people that Disney appeals to. And so it opens up by talking about a reservation system. So like she planned this entire trip, like scrounged together gift cards and resources and planned this massive thing for her family. And apparently now there's a reservation system at Disney. So there's like an app you have to use. And it says the system dispenses front-of-the-line spots and gives priority to travelers who book a guide, purchase expensive passes, or stay at a Disney property. So as a visitor on a budget, she was near the bottom of the pecking order, in which, thousands of spots for premium rides are reserved for the big spenders. So basically, the more money you spend, like the more chances you get at, like basically riding these premium rides. I didn't even know they did this. Like I said, like I haven't been there since 2008. But apparently there's like tiered rides now, and certain rides like cost money to make reservations on. You can't just go and like ride the rides, which is wild to me. So this is the shtick here about how the middle class has eroded, and companies are tailoring their offerings to the top. The experiences we once shared are increasingly differentiated by how much we have. And this is something I do want to call out. I was listening to a Modern Wisdom episode, maybe a year ago, with Scott Galloway, and Chris Williamson and Scott Galloway were talking about this. And Scott Galloway mentioned, because he is in the upper crust of society, how he bought a premium experience, and I think a guide for his son and his son's friend to go through Disney. He literally said this. He said, we now have completely different experiences. I think he was promoting his book, like the Algebra of Wealth or something like that. So he was on a book tour, but he was talking about this, how the experience he had with his son at Disney was so different than the average experience that an average person is going to have. Like they got to bypass everything, like the lines, like shortcuts, everything, just based on the fact that they had premium tickets and were spending a ton of money. So I heard that and I was like, oh, okay, that makes sense. But like seeing it here and written from a perspective of someone who's lower class, working class, who saved up, this was a big deal for them, and seeing how this affected them, like, really puts into perspective. But it talks about here how data is part of what's driving the shift. And so the author is a management consultant, so they have a front row view of all this. So they say, the rise of the internet, the algorithm, the smartphone, and now artificial intelligence are giving corporations the tools to target the fastest growing masses of high net worth Americans with increasing ease. So as a management consultant, this person has worked with dozens of companies making this very transition. Many of our biggest private institutions are now focused on selling the privileged a markedly better experience, leaving everyone else to either give up or fight to keep up. And it's not even just that. It's not even just like you have to pay up to have the premium experience. I think what's not said here, but what's implicit, is that everyone at the bottom is going into debt in order to be able to keep up, right? Because they don't have the means to be able to afford these premium experiences, but they still want to be able to go to places like Disney, and that's like quintessential America. Like I get people want to go there. I think it's dumb, but I get it. And so if the only way you can afford to go there is to go into debt, companies are going to make that possible for you. So that's why I think we've also seen the increased financialization of the American consumer, because companies they know which levers to push. So they know the offerings to give at the price point to get maximum spending from high tier premium spenders, but they also know how to gatekeep at the bottom, and they know when you're willing to go into debt for something and when you're going to walk away. It's kind of like Vegas in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of that same psychology. And so they've adopted it. So they know how to pressure you to a point where you're willing to pay slightly more for the perception of value or a little bit more of an experience. And I think that's important too. So the financialization of this is not talked about in this essay, but I think that's really important. Okay, so it talks about here. So this is the woman, Scarlett Kressel and her family. So that's who this is documenting. Okay, and so it says here, for this trip, they've already spent $2,300 on Disney tickets alone. So it's more than the average middle-class family spends on all travel for a year, according to BLS data. And so I guess like I said, there's tier 1 attractions. But it says that, so based on this, so Tiana's Bayou Adventure plus 2 lesser attractions will cost the group an additional $160. So this blows my mind. So not only do you have to pay a fee to go into the park once you're in the park, you also have to pay to ride certain rides. So you can't just like ride the rides once you're in. If you go to Disney, please like explain why you go, because this blows my mind. This would be like having to pay a cover to go into a restaurant. Let's use Cheesecake Factory just as like a stupid example. This would be like paying a cover to go into like the Cheesecake Factory, and like there's like the basic menu you get just for going in, and then there's a premium menu with like all the fun cheesecakes and everything. And to get the premium stuff, like you have to pay extra just for that menu. Like that's how I see it. It's something like that. So this is just completely absurd to me that people are paying this. So it talks about all the changes that were happening in Disney. So apparently in 2012, the My Disney Experience app was launched. And so this is why I went in 2008. The iPhone had only just been released. I think most of us still had T9 Word texting capabilities. So we weren't on the apps didn't really exist at that point. The App Store was still like being built at that point. So this was all new. So apparently now there's an app you can use. So you can track wait times, show times, restaurant bookings, and more. And so what Disney did over the last decade is they used that app to track the behavior of its biggest fans. And so they know who uses it frequently. They know how much you spend. So they gained a trove of information on exactly where guests went, what they purchased, and how much they spent, and it's complex. The app eventually became so integrated with a visit that much of Disney Park can be dedicated to checking it. Savvy guests bring an external battery. So this is insane because it says here, more than ever before, Disney and companies like it have access to data showing them who is willing to spend what for which experiences. So they know all of this. They know who's going to spend how much money, and they know the carrots and the sticks to use to get you to spend the money. So it's not just the premium, right? It's not just the Costco, okay, you come in an hour early. Like they know how to pressure you on the back end as well in order to entice you to level up. And maybe that's where the application of the Costco experience is. Like if they get to a point where they shrink the shopping times and it becomes more and more congested, right? Like you can artificially change the experience. More and more customers will choose the earlier shopping experience just to get away from all the crowds, right? So it's not just carrots here. There's also sticks involved. Okay, so it says over there, this person's 3 decades long consulting career. They've seen different industries use this. So banks, retailers, hotels, airlines, credit card issuers, manufacturers, and universities all learned that our richest customers didn't just spend more than the rest, they spent multiples more. Many companies found that they didn't focus on their richest customers. They couldn't provide competitive salaries to staff members, increase returns to shareholders, and attract capital to invest in new products. So this is interesting, especially that they added universities here, because these are effectively subsidized entities. So like taxpayers are subsidizing it, and it's fostering this tiered system of existence. Which now that I think about it, this is something I experienced in college because I did go to a private university in upstate New York, and people said this, and I don't know. Like I just took it with a grain of salt, but there were like certain people who had like rooms, for example. So you had everyone I think has at least one roommate, but there's some rooms that are private rooms. And those rooms were given to people who paid like 100% out of pocket. So like I heard rumors about like certain particular individuals who had wealth, and they also lived in these single person dorm rooms. And so this was kind of like what clued me in that maybe like there was some sort of prioritization, is that you gave like it was clear the university was giving preferential treatment to the wealthiest people. And I was too stupid and dumb at the time to really know much of anything. And I had never like there were people in my hometown who made money. I'm sure there were people who made, $250,000 a year. They were probably rare. I had never met people who had millions of dollars before until I went to college. And just encountering people who had designer handbags and like it meant nothing to me because I didn't know what these brands were, right? But this was my first exposure to that was in college. And so kind of thinking back, it's like, okay, like the university knew this, like they were prioritizing the experience for their wealthiest students, the students that were paying out of pocket. And the rest of us kind of just got what we got. And, they were fine with that. But I mean, that's probably why too, look at Ivy Leagues, right? Like they're not as diversified socioeconomically as they want you to believe. Even if you're ridiculously smart, there's only so many slots for poor students to come because they really cater to the children of the affluent, right? So that's really interesting to think about because, yeah, like banks and retailers and hotels and airlines, like I think we all know that they do this, but they're all private companies. But universities, both public and private universities, are basically being subsidized by taxpayers, and they're doing this. So that's really interesting. Okay, so it says here in October 2021, Disney killed its free fast pass system. So this was because of COVID. And so that upset people. And they started offering ride reservations for $15 each at Disney World. I can't imagine. I cannot imagine. Like we wouldn't have gone. My high school class would not have gone if that were the case. I love the fast pass system. I thought that was the highlight of my trip. Okay. So the result of getting rid of fast pass has been a complex multi-tiered structure in which a large number of low-weight spots on the best rides are handed to those who pay dearly for a private guide, for a pricey pass, or for a room in certain Disney-owned properties. And this is exactly what Scott Galloway had testified and attested to, that he experienced this with his son and his son's friend, that they were able to have the premium experience because they could afford the nicer things. And so apparently there was a hack at Disney, and the hacker exposed data about how much money they're making on these skip the line products, as they're calling it. But apparently from 2021 to 2024, they made $724 million, like convincing people to pay money to skip the line. And it's not even just this, like airlines do this, right? Like airlines will do this for the preference of choosing your own seats, right? Like they'll try to get you to pay more, not just to upgrade, but to choose your own seat. Or and a lot of times they'll do that too because they know a lot of people bring carry-ons. And if you've ever flown and you've been in like one of the later boarding groups, sometimes you'll have to gate check, especially if it's a full flight, you'll have to gate check your bag. And so people will pay premium to avoid that, which is crazy. But yeah, this is like a massive line of business for Disney. So they've introduced it's called the Lightning Lane Premier Pass. Prices vary, but can easily be over $400 on a given day. So, okay, I don't know. Again, if you've been to Disney recently, please explain this. So my understanding is you pay for the pass itself. So you go into like the park pass, set the entry into the pass, and then you can pay for this pass, which will let you skip the line or like give you premium access to certain rides. And then there's a separate pricing system, like starting at whatever $15 or whatever for a reservation. So like if it's a tier 1 ride, you have to reserve it. The Lightning Lane Premier Pass, it varies by day, but it gives you preferential treatment. And then you have to pay to actually get in. So like I would be curious to know if you guys have been, like how much you've spent doing all this, because that just seems absurd to me. Okay. So yeah, talks about how she had some issues with like her mobility because she's in a scooter. They lost some time, and apparently, so because of the delay, they weren't able to ride the major Star Wars themed rides. Okay, and so she considered trying to reserve this Rise of the Resistance ride in advance, but decided against it because of the price tag, $110 for 5 people. $110. This woman paid $2,300 to go to Disney World with her family, and then was considering paying another $110 to reserve this ride for 5 people. That's just, it blows my mind. It blows my mind that we have accepted this and tolerated it. Okay. So the Lightning Lane Premier Pass, it ushers its holders to the front of the line at each ride once. Okay. So this is talking about another guy here, Sean Conahan. He is a tech executive who took his daughter to Disney World in Orlando and talks about like the premium experience. So he got this Premier Pass. So yeah, it looks like this is what replaced the Fast Pass. So you're paying for the Premium Pass to basically cut the line, but it doesn't seem like it's a guarantee to ride those premium rides. So it sounds like you still have to reserve the rides on top of that. And then of course the park entry fee itself. So it seems like there's 3 different types of pricing going on here. So this is the logic for it. He says, given he'd already spent $7,000 for the 4-day trip, it's not that crazy to spend another $900. And so this is how the more affluent folks look at things. It's like, okay, well, what's another $900 on a $7,000 trip? Whereas if you're pinching pennies to try to make that $7,000 trip in the first place, another $900 is like, oh my gosh, like you just don't have the juice to squeeze to do it. So apparently, okay, pass holders don't need to worry about booking reservations online in advance. The system holds all their seats for them. Okay, so it looks like maybe you get seats. I don't know if this still applies to those tier 1 rides though. So someone clarify that for me. Okay. Oh, and it talks here, and I didn't cover this above, but apparently that woman in the beginning who booked hers, she deliberately booked in the summer when it was hot because that's when the prices were lower, where this guy booked, it looks like, I want to say in January, around New Year's, yeah, when it would be cooler. So that's also a thing too, is there's people who, the people who can afford to go in the more normal times of the year are doing so because they're paying a premium for that. It's more expensive. Those who can't are going in the heat of summer and suffering as a result. Okay. So it says here, one of the economic puzzles of the past 5 years has been the persistence of serious consumer negativity at a time when nearly everyone has a job, median household incomes are historically high, and we're spending more than we did before the pandemic. Yeah, all but the most affluent are seemingly not happy with the economy or their place in it. And this is true. And I like to frame this as Main Street versus Wall Street. Like, we don't live in the same economy, and we haven't for some time now. I think for most people on Main Street, so your average middle-class people, I think we've been living in a delayed recession since the end of the 2008 financial crisis. I don't think that ever recovered. I think low interest rates and access to cheap credit was a Band-Aid that covered up the problem. You had tech companies in Silicon Valley that had access to money, and so they used it. Uber is a fantastic example of what I mean by when I say this. To get its users and to get people to use the app, they basically subsidized the cost of riding an app, so it created an artificially lower price, so everyone was Ubering because it was cheap. And then when they got rid of those subsidies, they called it the millennial subsidy, but when they got rid of those subsidies because they started to pull back after COVID and credit went up, prices went through the roof. So it wasn't just inflation, right? It was that for the past decade, cheap credit has made it possible for companies to subsidize their products and their services. And then once the cost of credit went up, thanks to high interest rates, the actual real price became manifest. So it appeared like it was inflation, but not all places, not everything was necessarily inflationary. So I think we've been living under a spell, and the reality is things have not been good. They've been pretty bad since the 2008 recession. But the media just tells us this story that, things are great. There's jobs. Even now, when we all know there are no jobs, the media is like, oh, there's been gains here and this is doing great. And so we've all been gaslit, and we know this. I mean, I just covered a video about a couple economists who are like, well, yeah, groceries have never been more affordable. And yeah, in the macro, that's true. But in the day-to-day, it's not. Like, we're spending more money with less purchasing power. So everyone is feeling the squeeze. And so Wall Street has been ignoring Main Street, largely in part because Wall Street clearly, based on this information here, has been focusing exclusively on its most affluent customers because that's where it's driving revenue from. That's where it's generating return for shareholders. So if the priority is to generate a return for shareholders, and that return is coming from your most affluent customers, like that's who you're focusing on. The rest of us peasants are just kind of fending for ourselves, trying to figure out like how we're supposed to make it. Okay. So this is the interesting part here. So it's not just that we're having different experiences going to Disney World, for example. It's that we're starting to see the segmentation of different realities based on socioeconomic status. So the author writes, based on what we earn, we see different ads, stand in different lines, eat different foods, stay in different hotels, watch the parade from different sections, so on and so on. What's profitable today is not unification, segmentation. And this is, again, Scott Galloway testified to this. It really is a breakaway. Like those who can afford to are breaking away, and everyone else is kind of being left behind. And so we're starting to see, we're having different experiences, so we can't really relate to one another, right? I think he gave, in that interview, if I remember correctly, I think he talked about the doctor's office too as another example. So you have the folks who are on Medicaid or Medicare, at the lower end, who are just, going to where they can, wherever's available, even people who are on the exchange, right? Like, you don't really get to choose your doctor. You're just going to wherever you can get in. A lot of times people are going to these private equity owned clinics that have started popping up in shopping plazas. Not sure if you paid attention to that, but that's definitely been happening over the past couple of years. So you have people doing that. You have the ones who I would say are still like traditionally middle class, who kind of get insurance and stay with their doctors. They're doing so. And then you're seeing the rise of concierge medicine. So I think One Medical is a good example of this. Like, you pay a premium for a concierge experience. So even within medical and healthcare, there's different levels of service you're getting. And like, with all due respect, cancer doesn't discriminate based on socioeconomic status, right? Like, cancer is going to affect the person at the bottom end of the totem pole just as much as the person at the top. But the person at the top who can afford the different premium tier of healthcare services, they might have a better experience, a better stay at a hospital, better chance of survival, better medication. Like, it really changes things for them, and I think that's really important. I'm going to dive into that in just a moment, so hold on to that. But it closes out here saying that this woman figured that her 7 days in Orlando cost about $8,000 for 2 adults and 3 kids. So for 5 people, $8,000. That's around 15% of what she and her daughter combined earn each year after taxes. That is wild to me that you would pay that much money to go to Disney World. But this is where we're at, and this is what's happening. So I want to dive into this concept of segmentation, specifically as it relates to healthcare, because we can criticize Disney, we can criticize Costco, we can criticize all these places. At the end of the day, like, life and death does not depend on going to Disney. Everyone will still survive. But the question is, what happens when this type of segmentation and premium level tiered pricing comes to essential services? So things like medical care. So this is an essay I wrote back in April, but this was based on the most recent season of Black Mirror. So if you haven't seen it, there are some spoilers in here. So just stop listening if you haven't watched this and you want to. But this is I think this was the first episode in the most recent Black Mirror, but it's called Common People, and it looks at healthcare system, and the cost of healthcare. It looks at the cost of living crisis. It looks at the subscription economy. And this is the logical end state, I think, of where this premium level pricing is going, and where this segmentation of our society into new different tiers based on spending capability is heading. This is the logical end state. So just to give you the gist of it. So this episode follows the lives of Amanda and Mike. So they're a couple, like your average middle class couple. I think Amanda was a teacher and Mike is a welder or works like a blue collar job. And so Amanda experiences a medical emergency, and she is able to have a new lease on life thanks to a technology that basically fixes the function of her brain. And I think, I don't know for certain, but I think this is a commentary on Neuralink, or the concept of Neuralink. So an implant that affects your neural capabilities in her brain. And so they're in the hospital room, like trying to figure out what's going to happen. She's on the cusp of being brain dead, basically. And this person comes and sells a solution. So it's like this Neuralink type implant that for $300 a month will basically connect to this like global internet infrastructure. And she would be able to continue using her brain. So she'd be able to upload data from her brain into the servers of the system and then reload things back down. So basically it would distribute the energy required to process thoughts in her brain and host them offline or outside of her brain, right? So it make it possible for her to continue living. So the cost is $300 a month. Well, when you're in an acute emergency, and this is why everything that was written in that Disney essay is really important, because when companies know your pressure points, they can get the most out of you. So if they know you're in the hospital and your wife is about to die, like they can sell you something real quick with strings attached, and you're not going to bat an eye, because you're like, well, my option is commit to this and save my wife or let her die, right? So of course, most rational people are gonna be like, yeah, I'll pay whatever, save my wife. And so Mike initially agrees to a $300 price tag for the implant. And so this is like the problem with this, and this is what the episode gets into, is that I think everyone knows at this point, and if you've used a subscription service that's based on different levels of pricing, you've seen this play out over the past couple of years. It's not fixed, right? We all know this. Like over the years, the price increases, yes, but we've also seen a stratification in the quality of the experience you have. So I think Netflix does this now, and because people had commented when this episode aired, it was like super meta. It was like, oh, I'm watching on the cheap plan of Netflix and I just saw an ad. I mean, we have Amazon Prime, they have the videos, and even that has ads in it, right? And so I think everyone has experienced this, where there's different levels of service based on what you're paying for. And oftentimes the most like basic service fee will get you access to the tool, but increasingly that's no longer sufficient to generate revenue for a company. You're seeing the introduction of advertising into those low level tiers, because that's the only way that a lot of these companies are able to generate profit. Again, Netflix, great example. A few years ago, there were no ads. Now there are. So it says, as the episode unfolds, viewers quickly realize that the interests of Rivermind, so that's the hypothetical company that's kind of like Neuralink in the episode, they're not aligned with the interests of their users. While $300 a month was the initial cost of service pitched to Mike, it wasn't the real cost. As the company releases new features, it changes the tiers of its service, driving the monthly price up. So the first change it makes is it introduces advertising to its lowest tier plan. Again, this is an implant chip thing. So you can't really like deal with advertising. It's one thing to have advertising on Amazon Prime. It's another thing to have advertising in your brain. So this is pretty significant, right? And so this affects her ability to function as an adult. There's also something as well where because so many people use this and they don't want to throttle like the servers, that some people go into sleep mode on the lower end, like you sleep more than you on the higher end, so they can control your sleep and your energy function. And so on the basis of spouting out advertisements all the time and then not being able to have the rest she needs to function, she's on the cusp of losing her job. So yeah, the lower tier option like gave her a new lease on life, but it didn't improve her quality of life. It actually reduced it. And so they are given they're sold on an upgrade. So for $800 a month, she can have a normal life. This includes traveling outside of the coverage zone. So that is another limitation, is that on the basic lower tier plan, you can only travel in certain areas before you're out of zone. And if you're out of the zone, like you can't, you just stop functioning. For those of you who remember when cell phones started being pushed out in the 2000s, and those plans, roaming costs extra, right? Now I think we all take it for granted, but if you remember, if you tried to make a call and you had a Verizon phone and the call went through on like the Sprint tower, you'd be charged extra. So roaming was a big deal, and roaming minutes were a big deal. So this is like that same kind of concept. And then of course, the most premium version of this is called Rivermind Lux. And so that's $1,000 upcharge on top of the $300 base fee. So it would be $1,300 a month. And so that is something that like, it doesn't just get you away from the ads and the extra sleep and give you more coverage, it allows you, like, there's an app you can use to like control your mood and increase like your cognitive abilities, right? And so that's why I say with like carrots and sticks. There's the carrot, or there's the sticks on the back end, right, for the poorer people, but then there's all these carrots on the front end for all the wealthy people that incentivizes them to sign up. So Rivermind knows like this is expensive, not a lot of people can afford it, so they offer boosts that would allow you to experience it for shorter, more affordable periods of time. So you could basically buy like a 30-minute use of the premium features. And so like the whole episode is basically goes through their life and how Amanda's life and then the life of a couple as a couple, especially because they're financially strained, how they're impacted by this. And so one of like the sub storylines within this episode is that there's a platform that's kind of like OF, but it's not sexual in nature. Instead, you do like stupid acts that grow increasingly sadistic. And this again too, I think, is a tell of like where our society is going. Like the things we expose, like the entertainment we expose ourselves to, no longer sufficient. So we're constantly looking for like more intense, more violent, just things that are more intense in nature. And so he's been using that platform to earn extra money. So, one of the first ones, it might start with, drinking your own urine, for example. Like that might be like the first stunt, but then over time it progressively grows worse. So the episode cuts to a year later. He has a bunch of teeth missing, so that's implying that he had to manually pull out teeth as part of the stunts that people were paying for on this platform. And that was all to keep Amanda alive because neither of them were able to keep their jobs for various reasons. So Amanda's disheveled, so you can see like they're not doing well. It's clear that he's been performing these stunts so that he can keep Amanda barely hanging on. And as over time, the common plan, so the basic low-level plan, has become increasingly infested with advertising. I'll tell you right now, I downgraded my Spotify just because I'm not using it as much. And this is exactly true. I don't even use Spotify anymore because the ads are so pervasive. They're so awful. The only way I can connect, I have a Garmin music enabled watch. The only way I can listen to my music on my Garmin, even though I've downloaded the music onto it and it's like saved on here, is if I have a Spotify premium subscription. So yeah, like things are held hostage based on your ability to pay these fees. That's absolutely true. And if you the Spotify stuff, the ads are just awful. So I've just stopped listening to it. That's basically like where this has gone, right? It's just so infested with ads, like she can't function. And so in the final scene of the episode, Mike had gotten enough money together to purchase a 30-minute boost for Rivermind Lux. When asked how he could afford it, he tells Amanda it was from an act he has to perform for a client later. He gave Amanda Serenity, and then I think everyone at this point knew where, and if you watched it, where this is heading. That the only way to effectively get off this train, because it is an implant in her brain, like there's no choice she has, is she has to die. So that's effectively, that's what happens. And I won't spoil what Mike does, but it's not a good ending. It's a really dark ending. So highly recommend you watch it if you're interested in this kind of analysis. This isn't just like a fictional show. I think everyone kind of gets now that Black Mirror really is onto something. So this episode really talks about corporate dependency and luxury medicine and where we're going. But more importantly, it talks about this. So devices that transmit and receive data, like a continuous glucose monitor, for example, have made it easier for people to monitor what's going on in their bodies, but it also makes it incredibly lucrative for companies offering these devices because it gives them a full monopoly over how they're used and how much they cost. So this is exactly the Disneyfication, but apply it to medical devices and medical services, and implants and tools and things we're using for like our lives, right? So Disney is a choice, but for some things like Disney, or some things like medicine, it's not a choice. So I use Levels as an example here of something that like looks at data and uses continuous glucose monitors. And it's a pretty benign example, right? Because it caters to like people who want to look at biomarkers and elevate their lives. But what happens when it's not a choice? I don't know where I referenced it, but if you remember a couple a couple years ago, Martin Shkreli, I'm gonna butcher his name, Shkreli, the guy who bought the insulin company, and then he like jacked up the prices. Like this is exactly it. Like this levels is like an option, or in any other like tool like this is an option. But what happens if you are diabetic and you do need stuff like this and you need this information? Like what happens? Like a lot of diabetics will use like a pinprick thing, but now they're starting to use glucose monitors more because it's easier. And then they have like pumps that will automatically dispense the insulin. Like what happens when all of that it's an internet connected device that you have to pay a subscription to use. And if you don't pay whatever price is being charged by the company that holds like manages your subscription, like, you know, are you just going to die? Like this is kind of the logical end state of where all of this is heading. And it's not just that we're entering into a world where we're increasingly dependent on internet-connected medical devices and subscription-based devices. We're entering into a world where the wealthy will be able to access enhancements that sets them apart from everyone else. And I think this is really important because I reference here Yuval Noah Harari's book Homo Deus, but you know this was kind of like the subplot of that Black Mirror episode. Is on the one hand, Amanda was just trying to stay alive, but on the other hand, the Rivermine Lux subscription tier really catered to elites and people who are at the very top, and allowed them to have cognitive performance and new cognitive capabilities. So you have to think of this in the context of where we're at right now. So you have tools like Neuralink, tools like AI. You have folks in Silicon Valley who do want to augment and improve human performance. And so we're going to be moving into a society where it's not just based on your spending power, but it's also based on your ability to pay for premium upgrades that gives you a higher advantage over everyone else. And so what happens when we do get to a point where your purchasing power allows you to biologically and cognitively enhance your life? You're going to have far more opportunities than everyone else, and you'll be able to compound those opportunities and excel. Like, okay, today, like I used the Ivy Leagues earlier as an example. So today, you know, the wealthy can buy their way into Harvard. Okay, what happens in a few years when, okay, wealth is no longer the way to buy yourself into Harvard? You need wealth plus high SAT scores, and you can't just, you know, go varsity blues and hire someone to, you know, get your kid onto the tennis team or whatever. You're going to be competing with other wealthy people. So within that wealthy elite who have cognitive upgrades, that's where we're heading. And so I think that's pretty important to think about. Is it's not just that, okay, you can't compete socioeconomically, as was the case with Disney, with that woman referenced in Disney, where we're kind of at now. It's once we cross the threshold of beginning to augment human performance, and we do that through upgrades, especially upgrades through internet connected devices and implants and that kind of stuff, it's going to be a point of no return, where there won't be an opportunity. Like once you cross that threshold, there's no going back. And if you forfeit the opportunity to upgrade, like you're going to forever keep yourself out, you and your family out of advancing into the next tier. So it's not even just like we're moving into like these theoretical tiers. Like we're moving into a species-based tier where you're going to have inorganic, boring, poor humans like you and I, and then you're going to have like your Brian Johnson, Neuralink type humans all the way at the top who are at least, you know, are doing things to make themselves perform at a superior level. And then of course, you know, AI and all that stuff is going to layer onto that. So this is really important to pay attention to, this pricing stuff. It's not just about the erosion of the middle class, although that is a huge part of it. So that's what I have for you. I would love to know your thoughts on this, because I do think this is the logical end state of it. It's going to be the integration of this stuff into essential services. So I've given medical here. I think it's already at this point with like banking and access to finance. Like I have very different access to a credit market and to different like credit resources and tools. You know, Mark Zuckerberg, for example, like someone like Mark Zuckerberg is going to have better access to different resources and strategies and accountants and tools than a peasant like you and I. And the same with someone, you know, who relies on a payday lender. You see those in those check cashing places in different, you know, strip malls. You've probably seen those, right? That would be someone who's unbanked, right? There's different levels of this. Like I'm grateful that I, have a bank account. There's lots of people who don't have bank accounts, that they go to cash checking services. And there's premium people at the top who, have so much money in a JP Morgan account that they get all this preferential treatment. So we already live in this world to some extent, and it does affect your ability to do things, right? Like your ability to access credit is huge. And so yeah, like I think we're already heading in this direction with some things, and I think it's only going to get worse over time. But you see it with food, like people who can afford. We haven't quite seen the tiered pricing play out just yet, but Whole Foods has released digital price tags on their shelves. So if you've seen digital price tags, and it's not inconceivable. I mean, Amazon's a massive data company where they can know that, okay, Amanda, you're hormonal. Here, you're going to be more apt to buy chocolate because you're more hormonal. Okay, we're going to pair my phone and the metadata on my phone to the price tag. Okay, well, for you, you can pay $10 for a bag of chocolate chips because we know you're more likely to splurge because you're just feeling like you're in your feelings right now. Like, I think that's where we're going to be heading. So I think this could evolve to food as well. Like, going to the grocery store isn't going to be the same experience anymore. Things are going to cost. Things already do cost more, right? Between ultra processed versus fresh. But even then, if you use the digital price tags and you use dynamic pricing to change prices throughout the day, like we're not even going to have a stable economy to spend in anymore. So there's tremendous implications to this, and this idea of stratifying society into different paid premium pricing tiers and the experiences you get. So I would love to know your take on this. I think this is kind of dark stuff, but yeah, I'd be curious to know your take. If you've been to Disney, what has your experience been? If you are a Costco executive member and you've shopped early, what has your experience been? And if you've watched this Black Mirror episode, what did you think of it when you watched it? I'd love to know your thoughts. Definitely share them in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching as always. Like and subscribe if you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next video.